what salespeople recognize as the relationship with their customers is the loyalty. They want their customers to be loyal. But if you want that, you need to give in return the transparency, the cost breakdown, the transparency on your products, on your costs, on your margins. I mean, this is all public information anyway. Welcome, everybody. This is the next session of Okiem Kupca, this time in English, but also Procurement TV for Prohibis in Czech. My guest today is, correct me if I'm wrong, Sven. It's Sven Schirmer.
That's correct.
That's correct. Oof. And good. I have my first check-in of the day. And the topic of today's session will be, well, I have a feeling that we've been talking about the TCO for decades, yet it is still the topic that is coming back and every time from a different angle. So Sven, so we will be talking about the TCO today, but before we get into that, Sven, may I ask you just to quickly introduce yourself? I mean,
yes,
which company you're from and what you're doing there?
Yeah. So thank you for the introduction, Jacek. My name is Sven Schirmer. You pronounced it correctly.
Good.
It's a name of German, Swedish origin. So Sven is from Sweden, Schirmer is from Germany. And I'm working for the Austrian Federal Railways, which is called ÖBB in Austria. Die österreichischen Bundesbahnen, to be correct. And I'm working there since several years. And I'm in the procurement department. To be more detailed, in the strategic procurement department of the ÖBB Holding. This is the, let's say the steering committee of the whole company. We are 40,000 in total, but in this holding there are around 200 people who are mainly responsible for the strategic planning, for the guidelines, for giving the instructions to the rest of the company. And in this part of the company, I'm working especially since several years now for the sustainable procurement. And my main focus there is to bring the sustainable topics into the daily operative procurement of our company. It's a public procurement company, so this is also a specialty we'll maybe talk later for sure.
Yeah.
And so
we'll get to that.
Decarbonization are important words which come to my mind. We talk about CO2 neutrality and so on.
We'll get to that. I confirm that Sven is very punctual. We were to start and he was a minute before so arrival and ready to go just on time. So I confirm he is working for railways in Austria. Let's get to the topic. So the TCO, well, let's start with what it stands for, the TCO, and what is it all about? What is it, Sven?
Yeah, TCO is the abbreviation for the total cost of ownership. I summarize it in a, let's say, very brief and general manner. It's a method or methodology for evaluating the complete cost which are associated with a product or a service throughout its entire life cycle. Some of you may already heard some other abbreviation like LCC, which stands for life cycle costing. This can be almost the same and is normally used in the same sense as TCO. And what is the tricky part of it, or what is the important thing of TCO or LCC? That it encompasses not only the obvious and the direct cost, like the initial purchase price, what most of us are aiming for when they go shopping, but also ongoing operating expenses, maintenance fees, repair fees, the money or cost for spare parts, but also, and this is something what a lot of people are mostly forgetting, is the less apparent indirect costs like training, support, or, and this is my specialty, the environmental impact. So this TCO approach, it goes also in this hidden cost part, which is mostly not foreseen or unforeseen, or sometimes very unexpected, these expenses that can arise from using a product or a service and you don't think about them in the beginning.
Yeah. So
And
as
we
you
avoid
mentioned,
a lot.
so just to quickly catch up,
Mhm,
it's the cost breakdown. So the direct cost of the purchase price that we have on the invoice.
mhm,
Then we could go to the cost breakdown and to take the elements, the cost on which the product or service is built. However, the
mhm.
TCO, it goes beyond. So it acquires all the costs that we are having, that we are facing after the purchase. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, there are different kind of visualizations of this TCO approach, and we will talk about this maybe later.
Mm-hmm.
You can go into the direction of direct costs, indirect costs. You can go up to the costs before you make a transaction or after you have acquired a product. So you can split all these costs which are involved into a product or a service acquirement into different separate segments, or you can split it in different parts. But in
So,
general,
in other words, it's not that we are also facing some cost of working with suppliers. Not that we just pay for the product or service, but it's also cost us. It's not like free. It's not free for working with supplier. We need to carry those costs also on our side.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
all right, Sven. So, what about what is about the importance? Why is TCO important? Why do we actually need to bother about that?
Yeah, if you think about buying something just for the cheapest price, this can be, of course, important if you don't have money in the short term. But there are a lot of factors which are more important than only looking at the price in the beginning. For example, let's stay with the term of costs. We have here long-term cost consideration. Um, this is what I introduced while I'm talking about the definition. If you look into a product or service for the entire life cycle, then the small part of the price tag in the beginning is maybe not the most important thing if you look over the whole life cycle. Let's take our easiest example. If you buy a car at home and you buy a cheap one, it can be that, okay, it's good because it was in your budget in the moment. But if you want or intend to use the car for 10 years, then you should also consider maybe the fuel usage. It maybe takes double the fuel than another car, which was only a little bit more pricey than the one you
Yeah,
chosen.
the residual
Um,
value. So the
yes,
depreciation of the car would also play a role, right?
yeah, yeah,
I remember from my experience, from back in the days that the premium brands, they typically are cheaper in terms of the price that you can get afterwards. So the residual value is relative high compared to some low end brands. So if
mm,
you buy BMWs or Mercedes or Audi, then you can expect to, or Toyota, you can expect to have it better within the TCO because it will not lose value that much over time.
exactly. But of course, if you take a premium brand car, maybe the maintenance costs are higher in regard of your yearly foreseen maintenance you are forced to do according to the service manual. But maybe um, the price for a repair is lower because they don't need a lot of repair over their life cycle. So there are a lot of small things you have to consider. And if you only consider the price tag in the beginning, you could maybe make a wrong decision. So it's always better to look on the long term and add all the costs or maybe all the winnings, because a premium brand car may be sold for a higher price in the end. And this can also affect the costs over the complete life cycle. So it's always better to have this long-term cost consideration.
Question, Sven, because that makes all perfect sense. It
Mhm.
it makes a lot of sense in the long run, but then quite often we have challenges with the board of managers. Uh,
Mm,
they focusing here and now. I see lower price. I want to have it. I'm not thinking 5, 10 years in the life cycle of the product, like you mentioned.
yeah.
So, what are your experiences in that area? So, how do you discuss with the senior managers that guys paying more now would
Mm.
actually bring more savings or more benefits, financial benefits over the long time?
Yeah. You can see it on the most bottom part of this slide, smart decision making. Yeah. If the board is not smart enough to look into the future, but only sees the gainings at this moment, the black numbers this year, and forget maybe the red numbers over the next 10 years, maybe they are not smart enough. So, but it's a very difficult thing to consider. I think it requires a little bit of mindset changing in the company. And my experience is that if a company goes into this topic um, with a good on a good ground, with a good basic setting. They incorporate it. They start to think about it. They make some workshops so that everybody is convinced that it really makes sense to do it in this way. Then it also reaches the top levels of the decision makers, and then they start to make smart decisions for the company. Of course, there can always be some decisions required which are not smart on the long term, but are required at the moment because maybe the budget is really not high enough to get this thing which is good for the long term,
Yeah.
but you have to do it anyway. So of course there are
Yeah.
always exclusions.
Yeah. Sometimes they may be making no decisions considering the current cash flow situation and
Yeah,
not the
exactly.
long term, So that could also be the case. All right, good. So, well, let's move on. Oops, what's going on here with the components? What are the components of the TCO? How should we build it up?
Yeah, as you can see here, I used the visualization of an iceberg, and what you already um, are showing now is the tip of the iceberg. It's the most obvious part of the TCO, of the total cost of ownership. This is what everybody sees in the beginning because it is on the invoice of what you're getting from your service provider or the manufacturer of the product you want to get. You have the purchase price. You have most times the shipping costs, and sometimes there are some order costs involved. Like you have to there are people in your company who have to make the order. They have to be hired. They have to work. So the operative costs are also there. Sometimes, and I put this on the water line.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think of this, sometimes not. Maybe you already considered this in your private life when you buy something which is not in the European Union or it's not originated here. Then there comes the surprise when you get it delivered and they want some taxes on top, some duties, some fees, and everything gets a little bit more pricey. And then comes the part which is under the water, and
That
this is
one. Okay, there's a
uh,
lot. There's a lot things here.
yeah,
You
and
covered under the water.
this is not a guarantee that this is everything. Yeah, you can find products or services which also include some additional words which I didn't mention here, but you have quality validation maybe. Yeah? If you change your supplier from one to another, and this one is not so known in your company, you have more quality costs in the beginning because you have to make sure that what you get is really the quality you need. If you have a well-known supplier, then you know that the product is fine. You don't have this quality validation costs. Sometimes you have negotiations in the beginning, yeah, because some new suppliers, you want to talk with them, they have to get to know you. They start to negotiate the contract, so you have more effort in this part, and this costs a little bit time, and time is money. Safety stock, for example, yeah,
Yeah.
I remember it from my past. If you're not really sure that the company which is now delivering your product is really that good and they are maybe able to make the repairs in time, you have a little bit more on your safety stock, and this costs also money, which is not calculated in the beginning. Energy demand
Yes.
may be something very obvious. Except for example, we look in this part very specific, the energy demand of a train or of a bus or whatever you have, machinery. It's at the moment when the energy costs are rising, it is a very important part. So it should get a little bit higher, maybe in the direction of the tip of the iceberg, but mostly it's forgotten in the beginning and you discover it later, and then it's sometimes a little
Yeah,
bit of
depends on the industry, depends on the product or services you're buying.
definitely,
The energy
definitely.
may be a substantial amount, or it could be very little.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting here is safety stock. It's for the direct materials mainly. If you purchase some components and products, I quite often say, okay, try to negotiate with your suppliers like a shorter lead times or smaller MOQs, minimum order quantity. So that would also allow you to have a lower safety stocks, which is a lot of money. One is cash flow wise, and second is also cost of warehousing, handling. And that is also part of the TCO cost, which is worth to remember. Sven, another question I have to you, because to have such a analysis and breakdown and knowledge, you need to cooperate with your supplier. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's not that you would be building it up on your own and then your suppliers wouldn't be aware of that. They have to be part of it, wouldn't they? Or can you do it on your own?
The part of the safety stock in special?
No, I mean the whole TCO. No, the whole analysis, the whole TCO analysis, because sometimes the safety stocks will not be, because it could be services. So it depends on the category, depends on the product or services. You may or may not have the safety stock component in it, right? So I'm talking now in general. How do you do that? Are you doing it on your own and do the analysis, or do you have to work with your supplier in order to build it up?
You have to work with your supplier, but as you can think of, the supplier is maybe not in the same knowledge area than you could be, because they want to sell you something, of course. They will not maybe give you all the information you need to rule them out of the pool of suppliers. They want to be the best bidder in the end. And so they could hide information which leads to increased TCO. So this means in the long run that you have to build up a very high level of knowledge about the product, what you want to have, and what is also very important, about the situation you want the product or service to be used at. Let's take an easy example. You want to buy let's say a bus or a car, and you don't know where to use it. Is it running on a flat land? Is it running in the mountainous area of Austria? It requires different brakes. It requires a different motor set. It requires, maybe because the temperature is different, another kind of motor oil, and so on and so on. So there are a lot of factors which only you as the contractor is knowing. You know, and you have to know what product you need, in what situation the product is being running, and how long, for example, is also very important.
Yes, that is correct. And then you have to anyway discuss it with your supplier. So examples you gave, the brakes, we have it in the mountains, so we need stronger brakes or more durable brakes for that reason. So the value engineering part, then the dialogue with your supplier at the stage when you are designing the product or service is also important to have supplier involved in it, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the most important part. So your engineers or your designers, they have to have a very good relationship with known suppliers. They have to discuss technical ideas. They have to think about new solutions. And then when it comes to making a tender, you have to have all this information in the best way written down in the requirement documentation, what you want to have the product to be able to do, so that every supplier can match their products exactly to this specification, and then they can give you the best offer. And then you have to compare. Is it better to have supplier A with this kind of technical data set, or supplier B with the different one? What will me cost more in the end? And the difficulty for us as a public company is that we have to put all the evaluation formula and how the best bidder is be chosen up front, so that every supplier knows what is the technical specification and how will we react on the calculation then afterwards. So that's not so easy.
That's the additional challenges that you guys are facing in the public procurement. But I think this is important, that suppliers, they also need to be open to share their costs and to share their solutions with the customer, so that you can both work together with your engineers and build it up. I think it's important because quite often I hear from suppliers, we want to build a relationship with our customers. And yes, I understand this is mainly in the private sector, or maybe it's more in the private sector because the public sector and the relationship with suppliers, that's also very strictly regulated, at least in Poland, not sure how it's in Austria, but
No,
in
we have the
Poland, it
same.
is very strictly regulated. This is not
Mm.
likely to have a relationship with your suppliers. This is more in the, it has to be all on the paper. But anyway, I hear many times from suppliers that we want to build a relationship with our customers. So here's the message to all the salespeople now. If you want to build a relationship, what the relationship means, because quite often I have the feeling that what salespeople recognize as the relationship with their customers is the loyalty. Then they want their customers to be loyal. But if you want that, you need to give in return the transparency, the cost breakdown, the transparency on your products, on your costs, on your margins. I mean, this is all public information anyway. You have to register your financial statements every year, but then you need to share it with the customers, and this is where they would give you back the loyalty because you will work together. So this is the message that I would like to send to all the salespeople. Same with the buyers. If you want to build a relationship with your suppliers and perhaps give loyalty, you can expect from them to give you transparency, and then you can trust each other, and then you can build up some very good cost models and do value engineering together. Good. So the components of the TCO, Sven, would you like to add anything here?
Yeah, we have not talked about all of them, of course. There are many of them, and we can talk about any of these words for minutes,
Yeah.
more. Maybe let's think about, for example, the staff training. This is also important. Staff training and extra demand of staff doing something which is not planned in the beginning. If you have, for example, products which need more or more difficult maintenance works, which maybe don't acquire additional material, just a little bit of inspection. Let's say inspection, this is a wonderful thing. If you need, for example, a machine to be inspected before it starts every morning of your first shift for 15 minutes, this can add up to a lot of costs over 10, 15 years of usage time. Whereas another machine maybe doesn't need this inspection because there's just a green bulb. And if it's green, it's fine. If it's not green, then you know there is something wrong. So sometimes these additional technical demands for product, which are getting rid of additional staff doing something, can work out in the end and can get a better price of this TCO. So never forget the costs of your own staff.
Over time, it can build up to a lot of money.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think the key message here is, Sven, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the TCO are the costs which are happening on our side after the purchase, after we pay the invoice. All the costs starts and the TCO fund starts.
Yeah, you're telling it right. The fun is starting.
The fun is starting. All right. So direct cost, indirect cost, hidden cost.
Yeah, this is a different kind of representing the costs part, which you have shown on the iceberg picture. You can also group them in a different way, like direct costs. This is everything where you get a price tag in the beginning. Yeah, you know, maybe if you think about the spare parts, the safety stock, we talked about this, maintenance, repairs, taxes, duties, and so on and so on. This is direct. You get a price tag in the beginning. You know it in front. Indirect costs, this is something which this does not have a price tag, but it requires work. Work is time, time is money, negotiations, some in-plant handling that you have to move parts differently than before because they come on a different kind of machinery, not on the truck A, but on a truck B, which is too big for the loading area there, but come on the other side. So everything can be considered. The tooling, the tendering costs, and here in the bottom right part, the environmental part. Yeah, nobody knows what the environmental effects costs. There's no price tag in the beginning, so it's not a direct cost part, but indirectly, and we are getting to this later. the environmental costs are getting higher and higher and will play a more and more important factor in the TCO approach.
Yeah, that we
Yeah,
will get
then-
to the environmental. We will have the whole block about it, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
I think what's also important to mention here is a test production. And of course, there's toolings, but then the production test on our side, you know, I'm from the manufacturing companies mostly, and then we quite often had to do the production test. And
Of course,
that's also, it can also be quite heavy on cost. So exactly. And then we have hidden costs. Oh,
yeah. Hidden
opportunities,
costs.
risks.
Yeah, this is something which is very difficult to calculate, especially in the beginning, and sometimes even in the end, after life cycle of a product or service. We're not even totally aware of the costs of your reputation loss. Yeah, for example, we tried to order some trains in the past. The manufacturer was not able to deliver them to our specification, so they were coming not in the configuration we wanted them to have. The people were not very happy about this. Maybe the climate control, the climate system was not to their liking in the summer, or it was too cool in the winter, something like this. Then you're losing reputation. They're not driving a lot with the public transport, using more cars, but it's difficult to calculate it. Maybe it was due to a season of flu that a lot of people were not using public transport in the winter. So it's difficult to put really a price tag in the end on one of these four hidden parts of the TCO. Downtime, yes, this you can see in the end when the product was not running, and you can of course calculate the minutes, and then you have a price tag. But you only know it in the end, not in the beginning.
You only know it when it happens. Already, it's too late.
Yeah, then it's too late.
That's true.
So, and this is the third representation alternative. I was mentioning it before, with the pre and post transaction costs and the transaction itself. So you can just put it in a chronological way when they occur, these costs. So if you like to show the first block, so pre-transaction is clear, negotiation, market research, tendering. Then you have the transaction costs, when the money is flowing from one to another company. And then you have everything what comes afterwards. And if you know before the transaction what comes later, then you are already well prepared. If you are not aware of anything what is inside this block comes after, then it can be a little bit surprising in the end.
And it could cost a lot of money. And then, you know, also, honestly speaking, I know lots of companies, they're not calculating it because that's coming. This is from a different budget. You know, they're working in those silos. So I've done the purchase and I don't care anymore because it's not my budget anymore. It's with the maintenance budget, or is with the sales budget, or is with the, and then it could be really, really surprised. I know one company, they received, that's an example. They have received a very big order from their customer, which they were not able to manufacture in 1 month because it was such a huge order. They had to keep on manufacturing for 6 months and then to deliver it all at once after the 6 months. But they did not calculate the warehousing costs of and then they were building up piles and piles of products that they had to store in an inventory for 6 months. They didn't calculate it at all, which turns out to be a lost sales. I mean, they didn't make any profit on that. They lost money on that because they miscalculate the warehousing cost. So that's example of what you mentioned. Like, you have upfront until the transaction costs. Well, it's easy to see, have the price. You may also have a cost breakdown from your supplier if you're lucky, if you're a good negotiator. But then if you're not considering what's afterwards, and as you can see, that box is quite bigger.
Yeah, there's a lot more to mention and to consider. And as you mentioned, it's very dangerous if you think in these kind of silos, that maybe the sales department is making a big profit because they put a big margin on the production costs. But then the warehousing guys, they have a lot of loss because they have to store it, maybe in wintertime, heating, electricity, and so on and so on. And then in the end, they are wondering in the company why they are not making any profit at all over everything.
Yeah.
Then at this time, they make the first step and change or share information, then it's good. Then they made the mistake only one time. But if they continue to do in this way, they will get out of business very soon.
They will get out of business, that's for sure. So another maybe good lessons learned: share information across the silo.
Exactly.
Well, typically that should be the financial controlling doing that.
Yeah.
But that's the key thing. Thank you very much, Sven. Thank you so much for the first part. We've just covered the basics of the TCO, which is the first episode. So in the next episode, we will be talking about the benefits, how to harvest the benefits from the TCO, and of course, how to calculate the environmental and CO2 and the environmental costs of the TCO. Sven, thank you so much for the first part.
Thank
and
you
I'm looking
for
forward
listening, and we will see you soon in the next episode.
Looking forward to see you in the next episode of Procurement TV and Okiem Kupca. Stay tuned.
Bye-bye. Good.
Okay. Okie doke. For the last part, I should have taken out the presentation, but whatever. Now I need to now stop recording.